Welcome to Stop the Fight, episode 21. And today we are discussing this weekend's fight between Charlo versus Brian Castano. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy, just...
All right, guys. Brian Castano versus Charlo. We got all the belts on the line at 154 pounds. We got the WBC, the WBA, the IBF, and the WBO super welterweight titles, or light middleweight. I don't know. These are super welterweight, but whatever. Sometimes people call it light middleweight. 154 pounds. This is for the marbles in the division. The winner of this is the guy at 154. Obviously. So let's talk about him. Charlo, 34-1 with 18 knockouts. Now, his alone defeat came against a unanimous decision loss to Tony Harrison. He, of course, avenged that loss and beat Harrison by knockout in the rematch. Now, both fights were very close, and it shows you a little bit of the weakness of Charlo. Or maybe the strength of Harrison, but whatever, one and the same. So, Charlo could be boxed. And that's how Harrison, in both fights, was really able to keep it close and a little bit ahead in the first fight. I think he won by around, it was 115, 113 twice, and 116, 112, which were about the right scorecards there. I actually didn't think he would get the decision because the Charlos are the more exciting fighters. They are the named fighters. They're both brothers, I'm saying. So I thought any close decision would probably go in their favor, but not in the Tony Harrison fight, not in that first one. So that was his alone defeat. Like I said, he did avenge that by knocking Tony Harrison out in the 11th round in the following fight. So who else? I mean, he's beaten Austin Trout by majority decision. Erickson Lubin, very awesome KO. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's, in the first round, catches him with a beautiful shot. And, he is probably the most talented fighter at 154 pounds. Whether he's the best, we're going to find out, I think. I think this is the fight which kind of lets you know about who's the best at the weight class. So who do we have at the weight class? We have, of course, Charlo, Castano. We have Erickson Lubin, who recently fought. Tim 2. Kaliakakis has moved up. And that's really it. Liam Smith. But Austin Trout, obviously. But that's really kind of it at this weight class. Lara has moved up to 160, if I'm not mistaken. And Tony Harrison, suffering a draw in his last time out. He is, he's got to figure some stuff out. I don't think he'll be able to put on a repeat performance against Charlo or someone else at the top of 154. Now, this isn't the deepest division. This isn't obviously 130, 135, 40. But this isn't a bad division. Obviously, the winner here is, I think this is undisputed. I'm almost 100% sure this is undisputed. But the winner here is obviously going to go up to 160, where the conversation's a little bit more interesting. So what can we say about Charlo? That he's similar to his brother. Not as gifted in the power department, though. Jamal is a little bit more, like I said, naturally gifted, I think, at the sport than Jamal. And it shows because Jamal, he does have the loss, Tony Harrison. That isn't to say that Charlo is not a gifted and athletic fighter. He indeed is. He has 3 of the belts. It's not just anybody who wins the belts. There's a reason why the Charlos are both highly touted. And when you look at it, he's a 5'11", 31-year-old light middleweight. And he's going up against a much smaller fighter than Brian Castano. Let's talk about Brian Castano. Brian Castano is 17-0 with 1 draw, 12 wins coming by way of knockout. He's from Argentina. And his draw was actually against Erislandy Lara at 154 pounds. Now, again, Lara is a hard out for anybody. It's not easy beating Lara. Only really the best people beat Lara. Paul Williams, even though most people I think thought that Lara won that fight, he didn't get it. He had that weird the cut that caused the stop with Martirosyan. The split decision loss to Canelo, which some people thought he won. I thought the fight was very close. Split decision to Hurd. I thought he actually won that fight. Draw against Castellano. And obviously he's had some earlier draws against Carlos Molina, but whatever. So Lara is a very good fighter, and this isn't a knock on Castellano with the fact that he drew him. But when we look at this fight, we have, I think we have a dimension issue here. We have a dimension issue. Now, obviously, you know, height isn't the end-all in boxing. Weight is, which is why they're weight classes and not height classes. But when you're 5'7.5", and you're going up against someone who's 5'11", and someone as explosive as Charlo, I feel there are some structural disadvantages. Now, both fighters are orthodox here, but there are some structural disadvantages. You know, Castellanos going to be walking into Charlo's straight hands, I feel, here. This isn't a fight you'd want to take. I mean, I'd want to take the underdog in Castellano. But Castellano, you know, in the draw with Erislandy Lara, showed that he has many dimensions to his game. That's what we're kind of looking at here. This isn't a foregone conclusion fight whatsoever. I think Charlo is favored, and for right reasons. He's the explosive, more seasoned fighter. He's much more seasoned. Remember, Castellano has 17 fights. Charlo has 18 knockouts in his 35 fights. So that's just to give you an example of the experience difference. And experience is very important in boxing, guys. Very important. So what do we have going on in the fight in terms of what are our betting lines? You know, because again, this is the working man's betting channel. So if you have some beer money, what do you do with it, right? Again, guys, not financial advice, please. Please. You're all grown people. You make your own decisions, please. So what do we got going on here? Okay, we have Jermell Charlo at -265 and Castellano at +210. To me, that sounds about right. That really does sound about right. Can Castellano win? Of course. He showed a lot of skill in both the Lara fight and then his previous fight against Teixeira. Very skilled guy, but you need to be more than just skilled against someone like Charlo. You need to do more. And I'm really worried about this height differential. Charlo throws straight hands. That power shot, that right hand that stopped Lubin, that was at that lower range. He didn't. If you look at the fight, Lubin's bent over, and Charlo was able to generate a lot of power in like that like chest level, right? Because Lubin was down a little bit, like, you know, he was bent down on his knees, and that means that maybe punching up at face level, Charlo doesn't have that much power. But as you see by the way he completely, you know, one-shotted Lubin at the mid-range level. And guys, again, sometimes your power is different if you have to punch at the chest, if you have to punch at the abdomen a little bit lower, if you have to punch a little bit higher at the chest, at the face. Those are three different levels. You're going to have three different power grids. You can't, maybe throwing up doesn't work for you biomechanically as well as throwing mid-range, as well as throwing low. Maybe you're able to turn over those punches differently. So what we see with Charlo here is that he is able to turn over his shot, at least at the mid to low range, very well. You know, I don't really believe in lucky shots in boxing. It's not my thing. You know, people train. There are really three punches you throw. You throw the straight left, the straight right, and a left hook. You know, fine, an uppercut. So realistically, I don't believe really in lucky shots in boxing. When you really only have 4 punches that you practice to throw, no shots are lucky in boxing. They all are planned, at least, in some way or another. So here's Castellano at 5'7", right at that mid-range. If Castellano bends a little, he's going to be exactly in that like kind of KO range that we've seen him like demonstrated against Lubin. And if you look at that first knockdown in the second Tony Harrison fight, a lot of it starts with Charlo landing a left hook to the body in that same range, and Harrison's a little bit lower. So when he takes that left hook on top, that hurts Harrison. Now, I think Charlo had already started hurting Harrison in the 10th and in the 11th round, for sure, before that game. So I'm not saying you can draw conclusions from that, but nonetheless, we have to think about the physics of the fight, similar to Donaire. the physics of the fight. So if you're Charlo and you generate in that kind of like, let's say, high difference of 5'3" to 5'8" range, that's where you are. That's where your power is, and anything higher, you're kind of not there. Then Castano may be walking into a really bad setup here, right where that power shot is going to be at its strongest. So when we're, like I said, when we're trying to bet, we're trying to look at where is the money to be made, right? So you can't fault anyone for taking Castano at plus 210. Those odds seem about right, and those odds seem enticing. Castano is an undefeated fighter. He has shown many wrinkles to his game with that draw against Lara. But what I like is the under 10.5. I do believe that this fight is all wrong a little bit. Like I think you have to be Charlo. If you see him struggle with Tony Harrison, it's because where the shots are coming from and how the two taller guys are fighting. So I like the under 10.5 rounds at plus 195 in this fight. I think Charlo gets the stoppage, and the plus 190, and again, the under 10.5, the plus 195, also covers if we're wrong about Castano. He comes in there, he's able to land, those shorter hooks on the inside. If he's able to do that and get Charlo out of there, then, hey, we win on that end as well. But I really think that Charlo probably stops him here. I really do. I think Charlo will show the power in that height range again. We'll see. This is a test for our physics. Like I said, what I'm doing is I'm taking the under 10.5. And again, guys, under 10.5 means in the 11th round at 1 minute and 31 seconds. Once it goes past 1 minute and 31 seconds, it becomes over 10.5 in the 11th round. And any reason that the fight ends, we take it here. So that's what I like in this fight, personally. Again, you do what you do, not financial advice, just something that I'm looking at doing. And again, to harp back on, as I said in the last episode, we are really in a golden age of boxing, guys. Another undisputed? That's what we're getting, another undisputed. We have an undisputed at 140. We're going to have an undisputed at 154. We had an undisputed at 140 a few years ago in Crawford, and we had an undisputed just 2 or 3 years ago in Usyk at cruiserweight. We were months away from undisputed at heavyweight with Joshua and Fury. I mean, if you've heard fans in the 2000s complain about, and in the late 2000s and the 2010s, complain about one thing is there's too many champions. And now, guys, we're getting undisputed titleists left and right. The champs are fighting the champs. I guarantee you, we are going to be looking back at this and saying we are in the golden age of boxing. People are going to look back at this time, right around that 2015 time, 2014, 2015 and on, as truly a golden age of boxing. So many great fighters, so many from Crawford, Canelo, Golovkin, Loma, Davis, and the end of the Klitschko. I mean, we are truly witnessing a lot of Kovalev. We're truly witnessing a lot of, Ward, of course, obviously. Truly witnessing a lot of insane fighters. Pacquiao doing things at this stage of his career, in such an advanced stage, is truly an amazing shot. And like I said, this is further proof. Another undisputed, champ is going to appear. Unbelievable. Let's talk about this one for a little bit, because that's the only fight I really want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about the Yiget fight. Don't really know much about it. I don't want to just talk nonsense. Let's talk about the fact that Canelo versus Caleb Plant has hit some kind of a brick wall for whatever reason. And speaking of undisputed, you know what I mean? Speaking about 168 undisputed, Canelo is slowly but surely gathering the titles at 168, which is quite insane. Quite insane. And his run is legendary. But do you know who he's in negotiations with right now? He's in negotiations. He's in negotiations with Gennady Golovkin for a third fight. Wow, can you believe if Golovkin's kind of holdout of sorts pays off right here? How insane would that be? Because Golovkin really, since Canelo has fought Steve Rolls, Deryachenko, which was an okay fight, it was a good fight to take for him, and Sharameta. Steve Rolls is literally who, and Sharameta I mean, no offense, but you can't. A feather fisted fight against Golovkin is a recipe for absolute disaster. He didn't look so hot against Deryachenko, and everyone's wondering, like, well, why did the zone sign this guy? For what fights? Well, if they get a third Canelo fight, for that fight. For that fight, guys. Can you imagine a Canelo-Golovkin 3? I mean, look, regardless of which way you thought the first two fights went, I thought he won the first. I thought the second one was disputed. My brother thought he lost the first, and thought the second one was disputed. Either way, the opinions are all over the place. Two very close fight against which seemingly are evenly matched opponents in Canelo and Golovkin. And they fought two completely different styles both times. In the first fight, Canelo boxed and Golovkin moved forward. In the second fight, Canelo moved forward and Golovkin boxed backwards. And they were shown to be right about each other's equals, about as close as they get. Those fights are split rounds, I thought. You can go those fights. You can be 2-0 with Golovkin winning both fights, 2-0 with Canelo winning both fights, or 2 draws, or whichever way you want it. All outcomes are reasonable here. So now we get a third fight, potentially. Let's talk about it for a second here. Golovkin is 39 years old, and he did not look great in any of his last 3 fights, except for Steve Rolls. But like I said, Steve Rolls is really not somebody who should be in the ring with Golovkin. He's just not. He's a 37-year-old fighter from Canada. He fights in Canada. He's not a world level kind of fighter, and that's okay. You don't need to be world level. He's a Canadian level fighter, and that's good in its own right. But he shouldn't be fighting against some monster like Golovkin. But nonetheless, how enticing is that third fight for us hardcore fans? This is a huge deal. If Golovkin somehow pulls it off, like a clear win of some sort, hell, any win, this will be career defining for him. He will go down as Canelo's equal for sure, and in a weird way will be much vindicated because he's had a kind of subpar career. I actually want to do a video on this, comparing the Kovalev and Golovkin careers because they're similar, Eastern Europeans, a couple of weight classes apart, but with a similar kind of persona. But I want to compare them because I feel Golovkin's career truly has been a little bit lackluster. It really has. I followed him since right before the Proska fight. So since right around 2011, which is funny because now I guess I've been following for a decade. That's crazy to think about, but I've been following him for a decade. And his career, when you look at it now, after a decade, after all the hype has kind of died down, it's underwhelming. It just is, unfortunately, underwhelming. I think even the most diehard Golovkin fans will tell you it's a little bit underwhelming. No official victories over Alvarez, and he didn't look in any of the Alvarez fights like the monster you'd expect him to. And again, this is going to harp back to the Kovalev versus Golovkin kind of like comparison, where in that first fight it really looked like Kovalev was the crusher and beat Andre Ward's ass, right? At no point did it really look like Golovkin beat Saul Alvarez's ass. At no point did it look like Canelo was really getting beat by Golovkin. It looked like he was losing the fight at points, but not beat. Like Andre Ward looked like he got his ass kicked by Kovalev in that first fight. Not the case with Golovkin. That's why people are so, in a way, some of his fans are, in a way, disappointed because, well, what do you look back on? Okay, he beat Deryachenko. That's a nice win. Who else? Well, he beats Jacobs. That's a nice win. He's got the Lemieux, William Monroes, the Martins, the Giels. But that's not... It's not what you'd expect from such a monster. There isn't really that name that sticks out. There isn't a Bernard Hopkins like you have on Kovalev, which again I will make an entire video on this. But you in this third fight, almost everything can be vindicated for him with a win over Canelo. Why? Because, people will give it the transitive win. I always say there are no transitive wins, but in this case, I guarantee you the public will assume that there were transitive wins for Golovkin. Because if he were to beat Canelo, especially this Canelo, convincingly, people will say that, in his prime, he would have most certainly beat blah, 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 blah. And he's kind of, I want to say resurrected, rehabilitated, Golovkin would be if he beats Canelo in this third fight. Does he? I don't think so. But hell, I didn't think Marquez was ever going to get the KO victory over Pacquiao, especially not when he did in that fourth fight. I thought, look, Marquez is aging. I mean, we can talk about the steroid stuff, but, you know, it doesn't matter. Everyone's on steroids, right? Maybe, probably. Maybe not. I don't know. But I assume everyone's on steroids at the highest level of every sport. But whatever. Forget about the steroid shots or not. No one thought that after 3 fights, Marquez would really get the KO, and he did. And Marquez's whole career, everything Marquez didn't do or did do, every fight he won or lost, everything got erased with that one right pull counter that catches Pacquiao coming in. That one right hand, that pull back, throw the right hand, and you became a legend, an undisputed legend. Nothing else matters. Not the Floyd fight, not the Bradley fight, nothing else matters. Marquez knocked out one of the greatest fighters to had ever put on a pair of boxing gloves. Maybe one of the 5 greatest fighters ever, especially if he beats Spence. Maybe one of the 5 greatest fighters ever in Pacquiao. And he finally did it. You know, people, it's similar to like the Golovkin Canelo fights. Some people believe, well, Golovkin really won both fights. Just like people believe that Marquez really won all 3 of the fights with Pacquiao before the 4th fight. But he never got any of them. He never got any of those decisions. But one right hand erased the entire ordeal. So Golovkin, in a way, has a similar chance, even at 39 years old, to do so. Now, 39 years old is old for boxing. It's old for every weight class. But for middleweight, it's not, or in this case, I'm pretty sure it would happen to super middleweight. For middleweight, it is not as old as it would be had this been a welterweight or lightweight. 39 years old at middleweight is old, but it's not ancient. And, you know, given what Bernard Hopkins is, now, of course, Golovkin is not the fighter that Bernard Hopkins is, but nonetheless, he is a good boxer. His power will still be there, maybe not the same rate, because I think he's lost a little bit of speed and therefore a little bit of snap in those shots, but he still very much has respectable power. And I will absolutely root for my boy Golovkin in that fight with Canelo. I believe he truly needs to have his legacy secured, because it is his career looks underwhelming in hindsight. It looks like a good career. It does. 1 million fighters would give their souls for Golovkin's career. The money is made. The kind of prestige he carried in the 2010s, in the late 2010s. You know, the kind of he was everywhere almost. He was the monster walking around. You know, Canelo didn't fight him when he had a chance to in like 14 or 13. When was that? He said, "No, I abandoned the belt." But in hindsight, you know, no victories of Canelo, 1 official loss, 1 official draw. You know, getting bloodied up, but getting really at points beat up by Deryachenko in a decision that many people thought that he had lost, even though he knocked him down in the first. So, like I said, that fight, the fact that it's in negotiation is quite something, guys. And if that fight gets made, that's awesome. That means we may get trilogies with, you know, obviously we now pushed back the Wilder Fury trilogy in October, potentially a late fall trilogy with Golovkin. Hell, that shit can maybe even be, sorry for that word. That stuff can even be made in September. We'll see. If this Caleb plan negotiation falls through, I'm sure Golovkin's going to jump on this fight. This is going to be a swan song. I think one way or the other, this can be a swan song. He wins, retires. He loses, retires. Right? I know, yeah, he's got 3 more fights with the zone, but this would be the zone fight. 2 more. I mean, they'll let him go. They're probably overpaying him anyway. Not probably. They're definitely overpaying him. So we'll see. Again, guys, we're going to check out this Brian Castano fight against Jermell Charlo. Like I said, I like Charlo in this fight, but I'm going to take the under 10.5 at plus 195 here. Again, you guys do your own stuff. It's not financial advice. And we'll talk about it when we come back. It's cool.
I'm going to go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. You know, just.